One of the final areas of doing your data analysis is the area of bias. Where does bias come into your data science process? Well, there's all sorts of bias sources, and they begin at the very beginning of your data science process. Your bias sources even start with what topic you chose to work on. Because if you didn't choose this topic, right, then you wouldn't have any feelings about it. But because you chose this topic, it's clearly of interest to you, and you have some sort of feelings about the topic. They even extend to what are the variables that you measure, right? We saw this with our COVID-19 analysis. We were looking at cases, total deaths. Then we started looking at deaths per thousand or deaths per million. And then we were looking at total new cases. So it's different depending on the variables that you're measured. How were they measured? Do we need to look at how each of the variables was measured to see how accurate our results are going to be? If you do a survey, it's in the phrasing of the question, right? On how you ask someone, even what kind of clothing you're wearing when you ask. How are you getting your survey sample? All of these things, who you ask, who asks the question, those all contribute to bias in your data. How do you handle outliers? Do you just ignore them? Should you look to see what's behind those? Because a lot of times the most interesting data is in your outliers. Then we look at machine learning algorithms and what is fair. Machine learning algorithms, what they do is they make more efficient any bias that's already in the system unless you find a way to mitigate that. So let's talk for just a minute about personal bias. And why does bias exist? Now, bias is not necessarily a bad thing. Fear keeps us alive, and we tend to be afraid of people and situations that are different from what we're used to. This is a survival mechanism that we have. So just because you're biased, everyone is biased. Okay. The thing is to recognize your bias and then figure out how to mitigate your bias. So when you're doing a data analysis, what you need to do is recognize what your bias is. What is your bias that you're coming into the data set, into the data analysis with? And how can you set that aside and try to put on the opposite hat? So if you're doing a political analysis, for instance, if you tend to be more left-centered, then you probably want to put on a more right-centered approach as you're looking at your data and analyzing your data. So whatever position you come from, try to look at it from the other point of view, at your data from that point of view, so that you can come out with a fairly unbiased result. So I want you to take this next few minutes to identify your own bias and look at the next few pictures and write down the first few words that come to mind when you see the pictures. Is your overall reaction positive or negative when you see the picture? So write down the first few words that come to mind on each of the pictures. We will put the results of this exercise in our discussion forum, and it's a place for you to think about and to talk to others about your reactions and how they might differ from other people's.